welcome once again to Sid Caudle, Christian People's Alliance. And you've been demonstrated this morning, Sid, and my spies tell me that you turned up and they gave you posters and placards and everything.
Yes. So, yes, we were this morning at the Royal Courts of Justice. They had a hearing to decide whether the injunction not allowing further research into puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones should be allowed to go ahead. So the injunction runs out on the 1st of August, and the hearing today is to decide whether the injunction stays in place or whether it can be lifted. If it's lifted, then research can start into 11-year-olds can be given puberty blockers. 11-year-olds.
Two things here, Sid, that spring to mind, and they are pressure groups. One is
Yes,
the NHS and one is LGBT.
yes, yes, absolutely. And we thank God for organisations like Citizen Go who organised today's demonstration. I was just there in support. And Christian Concern, the Christian Legal Centre, who have organised some wonderful demonstrations against assisted suicide and against abortion. So, yeah, I mean, there's pressure groups on one side and there's also pressure groups on our side. But it's very important that Christians get out there and support them because it's no good just saying, oh, it's great, that we've got Christian pressure groups doing their bit, and sitting in your armchair and clapping. It's you've got to get out there.
Well, the thing is, the Supreme Court has set things in stone,
Mm.
apparently. But they're getting round it, aren't they, by saying, oh, it's only experimentation. That is awful.
Well, they're saying it's research, that's right. But you see, the thing is, they've already got loads of evidence that puberty blockers are harmful. And one of the key people that's actually giving witness today at the Royal Council of Justice is Keira Bell. Of course, was a lady given puberty blockers when she was 15. And when she was 17, she said, "What on earth have you done to me? Why on earth did you give me those puberty blockers when I was 15?" I had no idea then what was involved. And I'm not a man. I'm a woman, and I've never been a man. It's when people are 15, they can be very rebellious and parents, the law should not allow people to be effectively sterilized for the whole of their lives because they had a bit of a fad when they were 15. It's the law should protect young people.
Absolutely so. We're going to fly around literally, uh, country and topic, Sid. We're going to fly around literally with the red arrows. Now, these are something that brings pride and joy to us when we're at an event and has done for years. And the skill of the pilots is famous worldwide. And here we've got something that they say it can't be flown, this particular aircraft, beyond 2030. And even now it's a bit dicey. So we've got to have a plane to replace them. There's all sorts of things on the drawing board, but to get an aircraft in the air that quickly is going to be pretty difficult. But I think it's all in line with a lack of pride in country. These are not important things anymore. And the thing that's come out this week that's highlighted it even more is no school in Britain teaches the history of our empire. I think that's unique in the world.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the left are very critical of the British Empire, which has been highlighted by some American lady saying that Britain is the most evil country in the world. Which, when you think about, Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia, which killed literally millions of people, I mean, to say that Britain is the most evil country in the world is just absolutely mad. But as one person pointed out very accurately, really, I mean, when the Soviet Empire collapsed, all the countries around Russia who were part of the Soviet Union all claimed their independence. Um, and But when the British Empire collapsed, I mean, countries like India, Canada, Australia, Jamaica all remained part of the British Commonwealth and still respected their loyalty to Britain. And some countries like Australia and Canada still today recognize the British monarch. So you haven't got the same situation where countries are like literally, oh, thank goodness, at last we've got rid of them. No, these countries respect the heritage which the British Empire actually gave to them in the past. And the British Empire may have made some mistakes and did make some mistakes, and Amritsar is one of the examples that's often raised. But the British Empire also did an enormous amount of good and brought parliaments and laws and legal systems to many countries.
Not forgetting the health. Again, some stats that have come out this week that those conquered countries, part
Mm,
of the British Empire,
mm.
actually overnight doubled life expectancy. Nobody
Mm.
mentions concrete things like that.
No, well, yes, as I say, the British Empire did an enormous amount of good. And the other thing which the British Empire did was actually brought Christianity to many countries through missionaries that went out with the protection of the British government. With their protection, the British missionaries went to many countries in the world, and there's countries today like South Korea and Nigeria and many countries that say it's because of Britain that we now have Christianity in our country. And that's an offshoot, if you like, of what the British Empire did. But the British Empire did an enormous amount of good. And this idea of the left that, oh, the British Empire is the most evil empire in the world is just simply not borne out by the facts.
Which leads us on to Andy Burnham. Now, you said in our last chat that you were prepared to give him a chance. Lots of commentators have already changed their minds, including my good self. I think we're in for a rocky time. Why? Because he seems to have got an Ed Miliband type fixation on devolution, mainly to Manchester. Best day of his life. His wife took exception to that statement, as we know. But there you go. And what I can't understand is he said, this is a no cost option. Come on, Sid. That is just so naive.
Well, it may be well be saving him some money because he's got his home in Manchester and he doesn't have to travel down to London. But I mean, and he's obviously got his constituency in Manchester, so to have some civil servants up in Manchester probably actually suits him. But as regards the bigger issue, I was certainly of the view that we shouldn't be condemning Andy Burnham before he's actually made any announcements at all or showed us his intention of his government at all. But I did say at the word go that I had major reservations about whether he will be any better than Keir Starmer. My biggest concern, as I said before, was dishonesty, and which we had from Keir Starmer in bucket loads. I mean, he refused to answer questions. Andy Burnham so far has been much more honest than Keir Starmer, and we haven't had all this. Everything is the Tories' fault, which Keir Starmer said basically consistently for 2 years. He wouldn't accept responsibility for anything he did. Everything was, oh, it's the problems I inherited. And incidentally, I was listening to one Labour minister just a few days ago who was doing the same thing. Oh, everything's the Tories' fault. It's but you see, Andy Burnham's not saying that. He's saying, I'm going to change the system. We haven't done well enough. And the first thing I'm going to do is to take VAT off energy bills to give people a little bit of breathing space. And today he's talking about possibly reforming the council tax system to help people, particularly in smaller houses. And uh, I think a lot of things that he's saying, are sensible, not all, because he's also talking about bringing into public ownership industry and this sort of thing, which would be disastrous. I mean, would bring it into public ownership without any capital investment. What industry needs is capital investment, not public ownership rather than private ownership. Um, so he's saying some things which are very harmful, but he's saying some things that are very good. But at least he's talking about his policies and what he's doing. He's not talking about, the terrible mess I inherited constantly.
I would have thought you'd have been against him. You're a southerner living in the curtilage of London. You're going to be whacked something rotten because he's going to give all the money to the up northers.
Well, behind what you're talking about is what they're talking about devolution and giving more power to the regions. That comes direct from Europe. And if you remember, that's exactly what Tony Blair tried to do. And they actually had a referendum in the Northeast to have regional government in the Northeast, thinking that, well, if any region will want to be separate from London, then it's the Northeast. The Northeast voted overwhelmingly against it. So there's no real mood in this country for having another reform of local government and more power to the regions. So, I don't think he's actually going to do anything concrete, frankly. If he does, it'll just be to prepare us to go back into the European Union, which is obviously also a concern. And instantly, while I'm saying that, the first announcement he made, which was removing VAT on energy bills, he couldn't have done if we were in the European Union, because in the European Union it's compulsory to have at least 5% VAT on all energy bills. So, which is quite ironic, really. On the one hand, they're saying we need to leave the European Union, but on the other hand, his first announcement is something he can only do because we've left the European Union.
Can I mention one thing that is definitely on the cards from what he's been mentioning and the kites he's been flying through various news agencies? If I was a granny in the London area and had bought a house maybe 50 years ago, terraced house, very cheaply, it's now worth 1.2 million, and she's not earning anything except a pension. And I'll tell you what, Sid, that could be at least half of the people sitting on rich properties, not their fault, that are going to be clobbered.
Well, yes, obviously it's a concern. I mean, what they're talking about 0.8 of the value of your home. And I've already done a quick calculation with my wife. And if that happened, our council tax would go up about £80 a month. So, and we're not living in a mansion by a long shot. So if someone's living in a property that's worth 2 million, then they could literally find that their council tax has gone up 10 times. Which, like you say, could be a major problem. But there again, I mean, people that are on very low income will get council tax relief, even if they're living in a £2 million property. There is council tax relief available, and that is a factor. But the other thing, of course, you see, is that the council tax bans were set in the 1990s. And there haven't been any revision of the council tax ban since the 1990s. So we should really be doing a revision of the council tax bans, because, we can't continue to have council tax based on property values valued in the 1990s for the, ad infinitum. And they do know from past experience that if they do a revaluation of the bans, there's going to be loads of people complaining. So I think Andy Burnham thinks rather than doing a revaluation of the bans, let's just bring in a new system, and that'll be less unpopular than just doing a revision of the bans. But all of this has got to go through Parliament. I mean, it's just an idea at this stage that's being mentioned as a possibility. I mean, who knows? Maybe in a year's time we'll be saying it's come in. But for now, it's just an idea that's been put forward that's going to be discussed. But as I say, I mean, I do welcome the fact that at least we're talking about policy. I mean, Keir Starmer, we couldn't talk about policy. He wouldn't talk about it. And when he was asked questions about policy, He would never answer the question. He just talked about something else, usually about what terrible Tories, and at least Andy Burnham is saying, this is a policy suggestion that I'm talking about introducing, and and that for me is a major step forward.
We'll see. I think back to the beloved Margaret and her poll tax. And there was a lot right with that, Sid. I know it was condemned roundly at the time, but in essence, it was to give people, well, as an example, 6 people in one council house, and they're earning good money, every one of them. And yet the council tax was based on the property. Much fairer to see what household income was coming in, surely.
Well, you see, you have to understand that when Margaret Thatcher got elected in 1979, she said we're going to review the rating system, which was the old system, which was very unpopular. And then when she got re-elected in 1983, she said we've tried to review it, but we haven't found a better system. Then when she stood again in 1987, she said this time we will definitely scrap the rating system and find an alternative. And so she really struggled to find anything better than the old rating system. And of course, that was based purely on property values. See, what the council tax system did, which was actually introduced by Michael Heseltine, was to really introduce something that was, not quite the same as the old rating system, but better than just the poll tax. See, the problem with the poll tax is that 18-year-olds who had got no income or very little income were basically paying the same as somebody who'd been working for 30 years on a very high income. And there was a tremendous sense of pushback. And the other thing you have to remember as well is that this was trialed in Scotland, because that's what she did. She said, well, we'll trial the poll tax in Scotland and see how it works. Scotland was absolutely furious. How dare you trial this thing in Scotland, as if we're some sort of guinea pigs for the rest of the country. And Scotland turned massively against the Conservative Party over the poll tax. And really, they've only just started to recover even now, because now I think they've forgotten about being trialed for the poll tax, thank goodness. But for years, you have to remember that before 1987, the Conservatives held a lot of seats in Scotland. They were virtually neck and neck with the Labour Party. If they have more seats than the Labour Party in some of those elections in Scotland. But by 1992, everything has shifted massively.
Yeah, we move on. And in one sense, back 250 years ago, and the US have celebrated it, the United States started its political entity. Now, it was something completely different, and it's remained different despite 250 years. And it's completely different from the European model. In Europe, we develop in a different way. Can I quote something to you? Enlightenment movements have become crucial in Europe and maybe have led us astray. In other words, one great philosopher or thinker or government has gone out on a tangent and said, right, we'll do things differently. Extreme example, of course, the Nazis. Other examples are a pseudo-communist regime. And it doesn't work. And basically, Sid, what I'm saying is that man is his own destiny in the Enlightenment, any Enlightenment movement, and can solve the problems. And largely, that is a socialist philosophy. Whereby a conservative, small c, philosophy recognises that we are body, mind, and spirit. And by the way, don't forget the spirit. Don't forget God. But we have done at the moment, Sid.
No, absolutely. I mean, the Enlightenment is quite an old-fashioned word, but it was certainly something brought in to counter the Reformation. So, on the one hand, you had dissatisfaction with the Catholic Church as the leader of Christianity, and particularly over the fact that the Catholic Church was very corrupt and they were selling indulgences in order to, you pay this money and buy these indulgences, then you'll go to heaven. If you don't, you'll go to hell. I mean, that's just complete nonsense. And that was really what brought Luther to say, no, wait a minute. We have salvation by faith. It's by faith in Jesus, by repenting of your sins and receiving Jesus as your Lord and Savior. That's what gives you salvation, not buying an indulgence. Buying indulgences is completely wrong. And of course, Luther was one of the leaders of the Reformation, Calvin and Zwingli and what others. And the Enlightenment movement was really the movement that basically said, forget about religion. We shouldn't have anything to do with religion. It's all about man can have his own destiny. And like you say, that's very similar to socialism. But what we have today is really New Age. I mean, that's really what is prevalent. And New Age comes really from the beginning of the 20th century with people like Elena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey. And Alice Bailey had her 10 points, which was basically take God and prayer out of the education system and promoting abortion, promoting homosexuality, promoting evolution. That was one of the key things. And get the children, get them young, especially under 10. You won't change the minds of elderly people. They're all their ideas are formed, but you've got to change the minds of children. And if you change the minds of children, then in time you'll change society. Now, that prevalent attitude is an attitude which is still going on today. And today, they're still promoting homosexuality. Today, they're still trying to destroy the family and the family unit. They're trying to destroy the link between parents and children. And today, they're trying to corrupt the minds of children by promoting sex education in schools and all this sort of thing. That's going on today, and that is a worldwide prevalent evil satanic philosophy. And I should say, by the way, Alice Bailey made no bones about what she was doing. She called her printing press the Luciferian printing press, and she said she worshipped Satan. I mean, she didn't mess about. She didn't try and hide the fact that she was basically a witch.
Yeah, I mean, let's simplify this and say, on the one hand, man is born good, on the other hand, he's born bad, which is the Christian point of view. Never the twain shall meet.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right, because socialism works on the belief that man is basically good. And what you've got to do is to bring out the good in man. And if everyone is equal and everyone has an equal opportunity, you'll basically have a good society. But yes, Christianity believes that we're born in sin and we need to repent of our sin and turn to God, receive Jesus as our Lord and Savior. And if we recognize the authority of God over creation and over every individual, then that's how we'll make the right decisions in government and the right decisions in society. So yeah, absolutely. The fundamental belief is man good or is man evil is central to political philosophy.
I'm going to read you something here, Sid, from The Guardian, blowing its own trumpet. But I tell you what, it says quite a lot about parts of our press. And it starts off by, The Guardian is the 5th most read English language news site in the world. Really? Well, that's wrong in certain areas. Believe it or not, it's the 3rd most read. Because basically The Guardian is not print. Very few prints of a newspaper are made. It's all online. and they don't charge. 90% of other newspapers charge for online. They don't, so it's a freebie. Then it goes on, yet we're the only outlet in the top 10 that is not owned by a billionaire, controlled by a dynasty, required to prioritize shareholder value over the public good, vulnerable to government funding cuts. Now, that is written from the Marxist songbook, surely, if anything is.
Yeah, the reason why so many people read The Guardian is when you put something into Google, it's The Guardian that comes up most of the time, either that or The Independent. And often when I put something in, I'm looking for the Daily Express or the Daily Mail, or and you normally have to page down and down and down, and then eventually you might find it. I was looking for something today that had been on GB News, and I literally had to page down and down before I eventually found it. So Google is obviously prioritizing these left-wing news outlets. And that's why people are reading them, because if you're somebody who is not like me, I mean, I'm looking for specific angles, if you like, on and specific reports. But if you're somebody who just wants to read whatever's being said, then you're going to turn to the Guardian because that's the first outlet there. And like you say, there's a clear advantage in being free. I'm having a bit of problem now with the Daily Express. The Daily Express used to be completely free. Now it keeps on coming up, pay £1 a month or something in order to read, and I'm not paying them £1 a month, so I just move on to the next item or whatever, or put another search into Google, but yes, I mean, it's the problem is Google, frankly.
Yes, there's a real problem there. The final part of this advert I shall read. No political body can strip our funding or shut us down. No billionaire can stifle or sway our reporting. And again, the left are so hypocritical. Well, what about Mr. George Soros, who is giving loads of money?
Yes.
What about the fund that you have from a charity bequeathed to you about 50 years ago, which is about £180 million? I mean, Sid, they cannot tell the truth.
Well, it's left-wing media don't prize truth. I mean, really, as you see, I've got into trouble over saying some things about Islam, and what I said was blatantly true. But it's something which left-wing media would, have absolute apoplexy about. How dare you say that's truth? But interestingly enough, it's actually been highlighted today. Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the left aren't interested in the truth. And certainly, I've had a problem with some of the things I've said about Islam, which is like provenly true. But the powers that be don't want people to criticize Islam. That's the reality of it.
Yes, indeed. Interesting to note the occurrence in Germany. And from both of the following aspects. Number one, it didn't take the police more than about an hour to get the fact off that this was Islam again. And even a name, even a photograph, compare that with what happens in Britain.
Yes, and they called it Islamic terrorism, whereas our media, our police will never label anything Islamic terrorism. I mean, if it's like, at the moment, our police, like you say, would say, oh, we're examining a possible motive. There are a number of motives that are under consideration, but we're not quite yet sure what the motive is. And even though the person that's done the atrocity is yelling Allahu Akbar. But in Germany, interestingly enough, we've had this crazy Facebook from Kate Osborne MP, who, even though this was an Islamist attack, on a gay pride parade, driving a car and killing people. She said, this is the fault of Reform and GB News and people on the right that have been blaming LGBT people. This is the result of it. What? What? I mean, no wonder GB News is absolutely up in arms. You know, GB News is very critical of Islam, as is the Reform Party, and certainly of Islamic terrorism. And obviously, Kate Osborne hasn't got into her head that Muslim countries, at least 10 of them, put all homosexuals to death. And under Islam, two men having sex or two women having sex is strictly forbidden, even with punishable with death. So, of course, radical Muslims, and radical means root, so it's the root of the religion. Those that are committed to the root of the religion are going to hate LGBT. And it's even parts of London, where there is high Muslim areas where LGBT people have been attacked. So if she somehow thinks that this is the fault of Reform and GB News, I mean, she's really has barking up completely up the wrong tree. Quite the opposite. I mean, the people she should have been attacking would have been people like the Green Party that have been promoting Islamic extremism through a lot of the campaigns that they've been involved in. That's the party that she should have been attacking.
We've not got time for our footy spot, but it's all right. We'll do that the next one shortly. But one thing we have to go out on, and that is more hypocrisy. And apparently, we will have to vote at the next election whether we want to or not. Now, think about that. Where's that coming from? Well, the Labour Party have reduced the voting age to 16. And between 16 and 18, the number of young people that are bothered to vote are pretty small as a percentage. But if you can make them vote, yeah, you're going to get a great big vote section there that's not going to vote Reform or Tory. They're going to vote Labour. Another bit of hypocrisy, surely.
Yes, because young people don't have the advantage of experience of what it was like when we had a Labour government, particularly in the 1970s. But they also did a pretty bad job towards the end of the 2000s as well. When we had the crash, and they'd done a terrible job, of course, under Starmer. So they don't, and when Andy Burnham says things like, oh, it's Margaret Thatcher destroyed our industry and it's something we're still suffering from, they don't have the understanding to be able to say, no, that's exactly not what Margaret Thatcher did. She stopped subsidies, but she did capital investment and totally restored our industry and restored the pride of our nation. Now, I know that because I lived through it. A young person, 16, 18, 20, has got no idea. I mean, they may study a little bit of history, but when they study the history, they study it often through a very left-wing lens. So, they're reading stuff, but it's only people that have lived through it that really understand and really know. And of course, it is older people that are far more willing to vote because they've got far greater understanding of the importance of voting and the importance of often of changing government and challenging government. But yes, young people will be a lot more idealistic, and it's like just believe whatever they're told, and go with the sort of the idea that, oh yes, we've got to save the environment. We must save the environment. The whole world will die if we don't save the environment, and the only party that will save the environment are the Greens, so we've got to vote Green. And because they don't understand that actually the whole thing is a complete hoax because they haven't yet understood it. So yes, you're absolutely right. Compulsory voting will only help the Labour Party. That's the reality of it.
And on that bombshell, we will finish. And Sid, thank you so much. We'll see you shortly.
Thanks.